Welcome back to Not a Straight Line with Peter Daly-Dickson, the show that explores the non-linear journeys of artists and entrepreneurs to inspire you as you zigzag through your own non-straight line life. This episode is a bonus, just for you. Episodes 1 to 5 preceding this episode are what we call pillar episodes, topic-based foundational content to build trust and comfort with the host of a show. This podcast activation is derived from a longer conversation hosted by a story engineer, in this case, the fantastic Rob Drummond. Here, you're getting a unique look into that complete conversation. This is also your behind-the-scenes introduction to the Activate Your Podcast service founded by Peter Daly-Dickson, where growth-minded entrepreneurs can activate their own podcast. So if you haven't heard Peter's 5 pillar episodes yet, make sure you jump back in the feed and give them a listen before you start this one. If you'd like to find out more about this service, head to activateyourpodcast.com/tell me more. That's activateyourpodcast.com/TELLMEMORE. In the meantime, sit back and enjoy this complete conversation with Rob Drummond and Peter Daly-Dickson.
Hi, welcome to Not a Straight Line. I'm Pete Daly-Dickson, and this is my podcast, I guess. This is episode 1 of many, many more to come. It's a slightly different episode. The first few episodes are slightly different in form and function, I suppose. I wanted to take a bit of time to set the scene of what the fuck does Not a Straight Line mean? Why is the podcast called that? So that's what these first handful, 4 or 5 episodes are going to be about. Just a bit about who I am, why this podcast exists, who you are. I don't know you, but I want you to be certain that the valuable time that you have is going to be well vested and well invested in the few minutes a week that you listen to this podcast. And hopefully in these first handful of episodes, you'll get a feel of whether this is a podcast that should be on your subscribed list, whatever app you use. So in this first episode, I have this first handful, I have my very good friends, Rob Drummond and Matthew Bliss with me. Matt's kind of just sitting in the background. He's got his wry smile on. He's the audio engineer behind this podcast. And because this is the first podcast that we've recorded together, I thought it made sense to have him on hand just to fight any fires that might arise. And also Rob Drummond, who I mentioned, is here to ask me a fuck ton of questions, I guess, to get out of me what needs to be got out in these first few episodes. I know you're here, Rob, to ask me questions, but just so the listeners know who you are and why you're here and not somebody else, do you just want to take like 30 seconds to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my work's all about helping people tell great stories and tell stories that change the world for the better. And I believe that you are one of those stories, and that's what we're here to do. Perhaps you could tell a story that describes the genesis of Not a Straight Line. Like, where in the beginning did this come from?
I was born at a very early age. And, sorry, do you want to go back that far? I don't know. It's a great question. It's the big question, isn't it? It's I could talk for an hour on this because the genesis of this podcast is the genesis, I think, of everyone's story. Being human, I think, necessitates that we have a non-straight line journey through this world. You know, if I think back, joking apart, if I think back to the 7-8-year-old Pete, what he wanted to be was an ice cream van man. Like, it was the best thing I could possibly think of in the world was to drive a van and sell ice creams. But I'm not that. And I think very soon after those whimsical wishes were there, they went away. that's the genesis, really, is that being human means that we're on a journey through life, and that journey is not a straight line. It takes curves, and you use the term zigs and zags, Rob, in our initial conversation about it, and it does. It goes this way and it goes that way, and it's oftentimes only when we look back on the journey that I'll own that statement. It's only when I look back on my own journey that I can see, oh, okay, yeah, I can see I can see how that fits in. I remember Steve Jobs gave an amazing commencement speech to Stanford years ago, and he talked about getting to a certain stage in life and looking back and seeing all the stepping stones in your life. And it's only when you take that time to reflect that you can see the line, the thread that joins all of those stepping stones together. And he gave an example of at college, he took a calligraphy course. I know college in the States is very different to here in the UK, and you can choose modules and courses and stuff to build up your credits. And he went on a calligraphy course, which, just in itself sounds interesting, but it's actually, that was the genesis of the Mac being the first computer to have amazing typography. Again, that's indicative of that Steve's journey not being a straight line, but actually on reflection, seeing how that non-linear journey led to stuff which changed the world, I guess.
You mentioned before the call that there was a lift ride that really impacted your thinking on this, and I wondered if we could share that story.
Yeah, I want to tell that story, though that story needs a bit of context. And to give the context means, I guess, sharing some of my non-straight line journey. I've always been interested in two things: computers and acting, drama, theatre, which sounds like a weird combination, but I'm a weird guy, so that's okay.
I don't think it's that weird. I think we all have these multiple facets to our personalities. But
when I left school, I travelled for a bit, and then I went and studied computers, and then I went back to Hong Kong. I was brought up in Hong Kong, but I went back to Hong Kong to work, and I jumped into a couple of amateur theatre groups. I wanted to keep that going. I'd love to keep that going. It was a social life as well as keeping that creative energy going. And I remember traveling home on the bus one night from work. I was on the top deck, and so how old would I have been? 20, 21, 22, early 20s anyway. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't want to get to 40 and wonder what my life would have been like if I'd gone to drama school. I didn't want to have that future regret, if you like. And me being me, immediately went to the place of, well, the only way that I can not have that future regret is to go to drama school. So from Hong Kong, I applied to drama schools in the UK, and I luckily, got into Guildford School of Acting, a relatively prestigious, I guess, drama school. And my non-straight line journey then took that track. So already you can see, from ice cream van man to computer nerd. I was working in computers and networking and stuff to now working as a professional actor. And I got an agent from my final year showcase. I say final year, it was a 1-year postgrad course from the showcase at the end of the program. And I started working as a professional actor. I did Panto, and I did West End, and I did national tours, and I did theatre and education. And just when you are in work as an actor, it is the best job in the world, hands down. But it's off and on. It's more off than on.
I could imagine if you had that ice cream van and me buying an ice cream and you'd be like, are you sure you want that? Could we sell me something completely different? But this is a development in self-understanding, isn't it? It's like you start off thinking that you want to do this, and then you learn a bit more about yourself, and you think, well, actually, there's a different path for me.
I think that's it. And even when I was acting, so one amazing job I got as an actor was at the Pitlochry Festival Theatre in Scotland, and that started my decades-long now love affair with Scotland. It's a festival theatre, so it's repertory theatre. So they do 6 or 8 shows a season, 6 months from May to October. What is that? 6 months? I don't know, but it's that kind of time frame, and it's in repertory. And I was employed, engaged as an acting stage manager. So I had stage management responsibilities, and I was also on stage. So as one of my first jobs out of drama school, it was amazing. Great great social life, obviously, because you're just you're as a company, and that really fed into my sense of community and connection and what have you. But at the same time, I also engaged the computer side of me. So I recognized that the box office, bearing in mind this was nearly 30 years ago, the box office didn't have a good way of keeping track of people, customers, and whatever. And I sold and built a database for the Pitlochry Festival Theatre while I was working there as an actor. So I, over time, over the 5 or 6 years that I worked as an actor, I just found myself slipping back into the computer work because it paid a lot more than the acting did. And I think one of the things you said earlier, Rob, was this sense of life being a non-straight line journey is, as you find out more about yourself, you go on what seems to be a different path, but is actually just a part of the path that only becomes visible to you as you learn about yourself. And I think one of the things I've learned about myself now that I've been around the sun 55 times is that, well, Pete in his mid to late 20s didn't have the mental resilience and the mindset, whatever is required to be in that environment and to be successful in that environment. So I guess it was inevitable that I slid back in.
Can you give me an example of
that? Well, it's going to auditions and not getting cast, and that requires a resilience of mind and person that I didn't have. And it's what I know now is that it's never personal. Casting a show, and at the time I only had experience in theatre, casting a show is such an intricate job because it might work that one lead character is 6'3" and the person they're acting against is 5'2". That might work, but it also might not. So do you know what I mean? It's like there are so many aspects to take into account. But I guess on reflection, I did take it personally, and I found that hard. And another thing that I've learned about myself subsequently, in fact, only very recently, I've been diagnosed with ADHD. And one of the symptoms of ADHD is rejection sensitivity. And in fact, I'm only joining these dots now in real time on this call. That would have played a massive part of being able to or not being able to deal with that supposed rejection as an actor. So yeah, I slid back into computers and to all intents and purposes had a relatively successful career in IT. I'm smiling as I say that because one of the other symptoms of ADHD is success blindness. But because of the way we see or don't see and perceive time, it's a challenge for people who have ADHD to remember the things that have gone well.
This is how we met. I met you in that world. And to my eyes, you are like the hub of the wheel that at like the center of the network that kind of knew everyone. It's like if you need to know someone, go to Pete. But you probably couldn't see that.
I'm really quite moved to hear that.
Yeah. How many, just keep continuing on the acting thread, how many years out of acting did you do? And was it always there in the back of your mind of like, oh, actually, I want to go back to acting? And did it get to it? What was the catalyst that kind of brought you back? I'm interested in the loop back to it.
So I worked professionally as an actor for 5 years, 6 years, maybe 5 or 6 years. It's nearly 30 years ago, Rob. So it's, I struggle to remember what I had for breakfast.
What's a few years between friends?
Yeah, it's a few years between friends. Half a dozen years. Always there. Once a thespian, darling, always a thespian. It's part of who I am. At the time, I didn't know it. self-confidence or whatever. Now I regard myself as a good actor. Great actor? No, not necessarily, but
Passable.
Possible. Better than possible, I think. I would like to think. I mean, it's for other people to say. But again, and maybe it's just a function of age, Rob. The older you get, the more times you go around the sun, the less you give a shit about anyone else.
These old ladies who clearly just don't give a shit about what they say or what anyone thinks about them. It's like, well, maybe that's the end point in this series of zigzags.
To not give a shit.
Yeah.
But
I was going to ask you, is there an end point, or is it just a never-ending series of zigzags? But perhaps that is the end point.
Begin with the end in mind. I think the day you stop zigging and zagging is the day you die.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's actually the point of it, is getting to that point of acceptance of the fact that your life isn't going to turn out the way you think it is in your head right now. It's not going to happen. You can set an intention and you can start moving towards that. So I set an intention on the top deck of the bus of being an actor, and I started to move towards that. And partly because of who I am, I made that happen. What you think about is what you get. It's a fundamental tenet of my personal philosophy. You could say what you think about to any of my kids and they will be able to complete the saying. But it didn't work out the way I had in my mind. But it's okay, because the journey continued, and I got older and I got wiser. I got married and I got divorced and I got married again and I had kids. And it's like, it's just your life. It's like, you can't, I don't know, I'm struggling to put into words.
It's because you take a risk in some respects, and there's an element of risk here, and you put yourself in a situation that is uncomfortable, that challenges who you are at the deepest possible level. And putting yourself in that new situation, it's like putting yourself in a new room where there are other doors that you couldn't see from your starting point. So now you've got different doors that are available to you that you could zig and zag down if you want.
Just on that, so my wife Andrea and I have a thing about, if your life was a Netflix series, a Netflix kind of ongoing series, what season would you be in now? And just asking yourself that question, and obviously the actor and performer in me is like, oh yeah, I can see that. And there's a season, as you're growing up before you go to school, and there's a season, but one of the things that we got to a realization was that what would make someone's personal Netflix series be interesting is when they stepped out of their comfort zone. That basically that somebody who has never stepped out of their comfort zone, who has never challenged themselves, who has never put themselves in situations where personal jeopardy is involved, whether that be financial or physical or emotional or whatever, that's one fucking boring Netflix series which just wouldn't get commissioned. I think ultimately you're right, Rob, that it is about, this non-straight line journey is about, okay, I'm here now. What am I going to do next? Which just takes me somewhere else on my journey. And it's not going to be a straight line, because I'm going to be doing and feeling and experiencing things that I've not experienced before. So it can't be the same. It can't go on the same trajectory. It's the same trajectory, but it's just not a straight line. That's the point.
Yeah, I mean, if we adopt a storytelling perspective on it, there's pressure put on you in some regard as the protagonist that makes the current trajectory that you're on untenable. Like, you have to make a change.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, if we go back to plays, like a lot of great plays follow this kind of 3-act structure, which is in essence, subject, revision, new subject. And maybe that happens over your life. But then that 3-act structure is fractal, because within each act there's like subject, revision, new subject, subject, revision, new subject.
I love that.
Each one of those is like a little zag.
That's meta. I love that. And also, I mean, one of the things that the whole fractal or Mandelbrot set speaks to is chaos. That it's central to the theory of chaos, and I think I'm happy with that. I'm comfortable with that, and possibly partly maybe coming back to the whole ADHD thing. We are incredibly tolerant of risk because of what that gives us for dopamine.
Yeah, it's one of these contradictory things in that you're tolerant of risk, but you don't like to be rejected. So you probably shouldn't go and work in sales or something.
Yeah.
But maybe a lot of business owners who might be listening to this can maybe relate to that, but they don't like to go out prospecting, for instance.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And you asked a question just in that little rambly bit there about was returning to acting always at the back of my mind. So even when I was working in IT and I ended up starting and running my own software company, I kept up to some degree or other involvement with amateur or non-professional theatre companies. Less so when our youngest son was born. Andrea and we got married about 13. Yeah, so we've been together 20 years this year. We got married 13 years ago. So period of about 5, 6, 7 years, I guess. I didn't really do much, but it's always there. Like I said, once a thespian, always a thespian.
I have a similar nagging sensation about writing a novel. Something I tried to do when I was 21 and wrote about 20,000 words and then gave up because I didn't really know what I was doing in terms of the craft. It didn't really have a plot as such. It was just like a joyride of monsters and events, explosions and things. But it's still there in the back of my mind. I don't do it because I've got a lot else on and, whatnot. I've got small kids. But it's got to get to a point where I'm going to have to say to myself, "What is this? It like is this what you're settling for? Like just not doing it because you're busy? Like." And that point's going to come at some point. I don't know when it's going to come, but it is going to come.
Yeah, and I think those things that do stay with you are, I guess, part of the internal compass that we all have. To it's not a straight line journey, but it's not random. It's not just going here and there just for the sake of it. I mean, there might be times that we think, "Oh, just fuck it, I'll just go and explore this thing for a time." But I have a sense that, and you spoke to it there, Rob. I have a sense that there is an inner compass, a gyro compass, if you like, that keeps us moving towards the thing which is most important to us.
I think the universe knows this, and I think I'm slowly learning that the universe has a kind of weird sense of humor and likes to throw challenges in your way as well.
And irrespective of whether you believe the universe gives a shit or whether it has some kind of outside meaning to it. The fact is, to answer your question specifically, is yes, it's always been at the back of my mind. And circumstances, well, before I say what happened before I say what happened in 2021, a couple of years before that, I had got to a point because of the work that I was doing with the non-professional theatre companies, and the nagging thought, internal gyro compass was resonating, and I thought maybe I can have let's call it a second chance. Maybe I can have a second chance at an acting career. So, me being me, I went out and incorporated a company called Second Chance Productions Limited, and then promptly did nothing with it. Rob, you and I joke that you can often tell, certainly in our world anyway, you can get an idea of someone's non-straight line journey by the domains that they've registered when you look through their history.
I'm a recovering addict.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's companies. I trivialize that. I've started a few companies in my time, and this was one of them because I thought, well, there needs to be a container for that work, for that creative work, and there's a second chance. There was an aspect of second chance which really resonated with me, and I think is part and parcel of this non-straight line journey through life. We go down we see a track that becomes visible to us, and we go down it, and we get to the end, and it's overgrown, and we can't get through it, and we need to go back and have a second chance at the thing that the gyro compass is pointing us towards. So that's what I did. I set up Second Chance Productions. So that was in July, I think, of 2019. And then towards the end of 2019, I took a business trip to Phoenix, Arizona, and I found myself in a Lyft car. It's LYFT. It's it's a competitor to Uber. It's only in America, I think. And at the time, I was going through a phase of recording conversations. I'm a transparent, open, vulnerable person. I had smoked a spliff before I'd got into the cab with Renee, the driver's name. And when I used to smoke weed, I would find myself wanting to record the conversations that I had with people. And with hindsight, knowing now that I have ADHD, I'm certain that it has something to do with that, because I knew with my ADHD brain was telling me that I would not be able to remember the conversation later, and something might be said which I would want to remember. So I got into Renee's car, started talking, and he mentioned something about his family, about his wife and kids, and just something in me just went click. I want to record this conversation. So I hit the record button, and Rob and Matt, you've both heard it. And so I said, okay, hey, Renee, you were telling me about your wife and family. And we talked for a couple of minutes about that. And then there was a pause. He just said I asked him how old he was. I think he said he was 37. And I've been around the block long enough and know enough about conversations and what have you, that I just left it. I just left an open space. I'm comfortable with open spaces. So he said that he was 37, and there was a pause. And then he said, I can't remember his exact words, but basically he shared that he had just recently come out of prison. I'm thinking, okay, well, this is going to be an interesting conversation. I didn't predict that when I hit record. And he's 37 years old. He'd served 16 years in prison. So he'd 31 years old. He'd served 16 years in prison. So he'd been sent down when he was 15 years old for second-degree murder. So he didn't commit the crime, but he was involved. I think he said shared that he was the driver of the car and didn't rat on anyone. And said not a day more, not a day less. I got every single day that they handed down to me. And then that opened up the whole conversation around second chances and life. And he'd started a charity to work with kids to make sure they didn't. Anyway, so then the acting was in the back of my mind, but this whole idea about second chances as well, and that kind of just really resonating with me, and that stayed with me as well. And then coming to 2021, I shared that something happened, and what happened is that the result of what happened is I walked away from the software company that I had started. I was working with two friends, and I feel bad about what happened there. So hopefully that relationship will be able to heal back again. Yeah. So my mental health was I just was not in a good place, and I walked away. And my wife, fully supportive, she could see that I was becoming I don't want to sound too dramatic about it, but a shadow of my former self, I guess. And she found me.
Your wife always knows this before you know it as well, don't they? It's really annoying when it just turns out to be dead on accurate. Like.
Wives and partners in general, I think it's the people that we're close to and intimate with that can see us in ways that we need to be seen.
Maybe that's a sign that you need to zag. Is that your partner's giving you clues?
Interesting.
And we reject those clues because of ego and self-absorption, maybe.
So anyway, fully supportive, obviously, because I think Ralph Waldo Emerson said health is the first wealth. So she was concerned for my health. But the reality is that bills still have to be paid. The mortgage still has to be paid. So she found me the job that I'm currently doing, which is moving luxury vehicles and other vehicles around the UK from customers to dealers, from dealers to customers, from one depot to another depot, whatever. If a vehicle needs to be moved, they give it to people like me to move them around. And that's done a tremendous amount for me, not least of which slowing me down. So ADHD, that kind of, always on the move, got to be doing stuff, get that dopamine, when you drive in a car, you can't go over the speed limit. Well, because if you give you can, but if you go over the speed limit when you drive professionally, then you don't you don't have a driving job anymore.
Professionally very long.
Very long, exactly. So straight away you're slowing down, and when you're waiting for a bus or a train to get you to the next job, you can jump up and down all you like, but it's not going to make your transport arrive any quicker. So just that slower pace of life was just immensely valuable and necessary for me. And the other thing that it gave me was time to think. I am a thinker. I am a deep thinker. And I never really consistently gave myself time to do the quality of thinking which I thrive on. And when you're driving for 4 hours, you can fill it with radio and podcasts and audiobooks and stuff. But I found myself doing a lot of thinking. And after 2 years, I guess, the certainty that I came to was that I am an artist. I'm a creator. I am an actor. I am a producer. The producer element really plays into the whole sort of entrepreneurial thing. I love getting things started. And that's symptomatic of ADHD as well. That kind of activation.
You're a fire starter,
that activation of things, getting things going. And I see that playing out now that I'm in this part of my non-straight line journey, as both producing creatively, films, theatre, whatever, but also producing stuff in the entrepreneurial world, like this podcast. I mean, there is a creative element to this, but ultimately the purpose of this podcast is to help me generate, is to generate an income, which means that I don't have to drive full time. So the driving job is very well paid, but I'm out of the house for 14, 15, 16 hours a day. And arguably there's a few hours each day that I can work on my own stuff, but anyone who's done a lot of driving in a day, if not a physical tiredness, it's just a mental tiredness. And when you're working on new stuff, the energy that's required to get things going entrepreneurially is immense, and it needs you to be at the top of your game. So I've reached a stage now in my non-straight line journey where I started to not drive on Wednesdays. This is actually being recorded on a Friday, and I do have a vehicle on my drive which needs to be moved to Norwich after we're done. But Wednesdays I don't drive, and what I started to do in those Wednesdays is start to put the building blocks together of what has become the Not a Straight Line Journey podcast and the service offering around that to activate your podcast.
I think in the last few years you've been making space.
Yes, 100%. I think that's what I was trying to verbalize.
And that again is a fractal thing, isn't it? Because it happened. It's a period of your life where you're like, okay, I'm going to do this driving thing for a bit. I'm going to pay the bills comfortably for a bit. It's not my purpose. It doesn't, cause my internal compass to navigate towards it. But it's a changing of pace that allows you some space to think. I also know that you're a runner and you run a lot, and maybe that is a sort of more micro elements of making space and like making space in the day.
Yeah. Interestingly, in the driving job, there are so many elements of it which are still true to who I am. So I often find myself, when an Uber driver, for example, finds out what I do, and I talk to anybody, I am 100% my father's son. I just remember we used to go to church as a family, and we'd all be sitting in the car in the car park waiting to go home, and where's Dad? And you could be sure enough he'd be talking to somebody who was new to church, and I've always I learned that by example, by osmosis, and I've always had an ability just to start conversations. I remember went on holiday a few years ago with Andrea and Isaac, our youngest son, and Lee, my wife's cousin. You don't need all the family details. Anyway, we went away with some people, and we walk along. Andrea and I just walked along the promenade just to have some time together. And she needed to go to the loo, so she went off to the nearby toilets. By the time she was gone for 2 minutes. By the time she came back,
you're like holding court.
Well, not quite, but no. Not only was I in conversation with two ladies that were sitting in deck chairs, but also found out that that they came from a place really close to where we live here in Coventry. And so we just stayed talking for a little bit. And as we walked away, Andrea said, how do you do that? It's crazy. But
some people give off a certain vibration that like allows those conversations to happen. Like, so my wife Lindsay is the same as you on school run, where she's like this social butterfly. She knows all of the mums. She knows who each child belongs to each mum. She goes out socially with them. If I'm doing school run, I get in, I grab the kids, I kind of nod hello at a few people, and we leave again.
Yeah.
If we get the tram into town, and if there's like homeless people at the tram stop, for instance, you can absolutely guarantee they'll speak to Lindsay, not to me. I just don't give off those vibes.
It's funny because I used to be like that on school runs, but I'm the opposite with the homeless people and other people. Yeah, there was just something about that superficial school run environment that I didn't attract me. But going back to this about aspects of the driving job still being true to who I am. So I tend to have conversations with Uber drivers, and I used to say to them, used to joke, and it's great when you have a joke. It's not really a joke, but when you have something which elicits a reaction, which you can just keep using over and over again because the audience is different every time. So, and there's a lesson in life possibly there is when you find something that works, just keep doing it. Maybe, I don't know. So I would say, I always say about this job, if you don't like driving, if you don't like exploring the country, going to new places, and you don't like meeting people, this is a really shit job, really, really rubbish. And I love all three of those things. One of the words I use to describe myself is an explorer. I'm an adventurer. I love it's the whole sort of taking risks thing, is going somewhere new. I love it, and I'll send messages to Andrea and just say, I'm in this place now, and it's amazing. We should make sure we come here when we go traveling after the kids are left home. And but the thing that of those three things, the thing that what do you suppose is the thing that I enjoy most in those three things that I mentioned?
The people.
It's people, meeting people. I remember last year, or maybe even the year before last, again, time blindness is one of the types of jobs that we do is called pay on inspection job, sell us your car job. So someone's gone to Motorway or Car Wow, and in other countries, I'm sure there are other services available. They've sold their car online, a dealer's bought it, and I'm there basically on behalf of the dealer to inspect the car, make sure that what I'm picking up matches what the dealer's bought, what they think they've bought, and then arrange for the customer to be paid by the dealer and then take the car away. So there's usually a bit of time, half an hour, 45 minutes or so, while the dealer's sorting out the payment to have a conversation. And the question that I found when I was on these jobs that elicited good conversation was, are you sorry to see it go? And it's like, I'm going around taking my photos of the car and, just in conversation, you sorry to see it go. And that just used to get, oh yeah, can't wait to get rid of this heap of trash, or the opposite. And this guy, Neil, his name was, said, under the circumstances, yes, my wife died 6 weeks ago. So they didn't need the two cars. And it's like, well, where do you go with that? Well, where you go is you stop doing your inspection of the car and you connect and you relate to this human who has shared some of his life. And I feel myself getting emotional here because that ultimately, I think, is what the non-straight line journey is about. It's like seeing something and moving towards it because it's the right thing to do, irrespective of what's happened before. And yes, I've got time deadlines and whatever, and the car's got to be done. I've got to follow the process. But it was it might have been for other drivers. Other drivers perhaps wouldn't even have asked the question which elicited the response. It was impossible for me, being me, to have had that response from Neil and not to just connect and be with him at a fundamentally human level. Oh wow! Well done, Rob. You got me crying on my own podcast.
It feels to me like this idea of having the internal compass, it's almost like you're being guided by a purpose. And that purpose, I don't think changes that significantly. It might waver a bit in terms of course corrections. It's like we go through life and we're trying to answer the same questions. Like in my work, not quite as much as you, but my work has been through various iterations and rehashes and whatnot. But the question behind it is the same: is how do we build trust at scale authentically, and how do we build a more authentic world? That's the North Star.
That's your guiding light for you. Yeah. I hear what you're saying about purpose, Rob. I think the word has had. It's a bit like ADHD in that ADHD suffers from bad name. It's like attention deficit hyperactive disorder. Attention deficit.
You think of school kids on sweeties, don't you?
Yeah, but also someone with ADHD has no problem with their attention. They can apply their attention really, really well. It's just often not on the right things for the right amount of time. There's no deficit of attention. And I think purpose suffers also from overuse, really, more than anything. And you see blog posts and you see videos, about you got to find your purpose and realize your purpose. And there's a lot of people out there, maybe some people listen to this podcast thinking, if only I knew what my purpose was in life, then I'd be able to move towards it. I think it's really fucking easy. Your purpose is to be you. Your purpose in life is to be you. It's to find out and know yourself so well that you are comfortable and happy with who and where you are. And I've never verbalized that before. So I thank you for the gift, Rob, of being able to verbalize that. And I think ultimately what you said about creating space for the driving job is what that has given me. I have been able to come to an acceptance of who I am and where I am, and now I can move forward with that. And I'm just so excited about. This conversation we're having now is creating the first handful of episodes for the Not a Straight Line podcast, and I can't wait to be on the side of the mic that you're on, Rob, and have conversations with people about their non-straight line journey. I know in my knower, so to speak, that the conversations that will come out of this podcast will. They're not going to change the world, but they're going to help a few people. I don't even know if course correct is the right term. It's going to. My hope and desire and intention for the podcast that anyone that you who are listening to this now will know that who you are and where you are is bang on the mark right now. It's not where you will be tomorrow or next week or next month or next year or the day before you breathe your final breath. Who you are and where you are will be different, but who you are and where you are right now is absolutely spot on. You couldn't be any better with who you are, and you couldn't be in any better place. Now, you might say to me, Pete, you got no fucking idea about where I am, the situations that are in my life, the conflict and the whatever is going on. And you're right, I don't. But we all have it. We all have different versions and variations of the same shit. If you haven't got shit going on in your life, then go and find some, because that creates the conflict, which allows you to find out more about yourself to help you get to a place where you can accept who you are and where you are. I got a bit preachy there. I didn't mean to. I'm kind of verbalizing stuff for the first time, I think, which is going around my head.
Can I share two of my zags that may be interesting? Because the first zag, there was significant pressure on me in various forms and whatnot. And the second zag, that pressure wasn't there, but it still happened. So the first one was in 2018. I was doing a head of marketing role. It was a full-on marketing role for a very demanding employer. On paper, it was a great job. It really fit me really well. It was quite long hours. And then in February, my son Hugo was born premature, and I was juggling all of these plates at work, spinning, and I just kind of let them all drop. And for anyone who knows me, I'm this like stoic, like hard on the face of it, quite a tough exterior type person. And I think I had what can only be described as a breakdown at work. And a breakdown for me isn't going and sobbing in the toilets, but it's just like sitting at my desk, feeling vacant, and then leaving work at 1:00 in the afternoon and going home, and just letting all of the plates crash on the floor and just dealing with the consequences afterwards. And then, so I ended up leaving that job soon after. But that was one of the zags, and I think that had to happen. And I'm grateful now that my son was born when he was, because it put that additional pressure on me. I was under pressure anyway, but I probably would have persevered with it and maybe caused a bigger crash later on. So I'm kind of grateful that situation happened. The second zag was then in 2022. I'd been employed in a lower paid but much lower stress situation for 3 years, and at the same time I'm self-employed and I do various things off my own back. And so it was in September. My son Hugo is now 4, had just started school, and it's that thing of like starting school where like everyone else is moving on, things are changing around you. And I actually went for a vasectomy. I was lying there on the operating table while a nurse is saying, just a sharp scratch, and that sharp scratch is obviously happening to your scrotum. And there was a 5-second moment there when I was like, I need to leave work. It's time. I think things are moving on. Hugo starting school. It's the end of my strong swimmer's career. It's time. It's time. There's this like internal body clock thing of like ding 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 ding. Like it's time to get back to something else. And I felt that very distinctly in that moment. But the second moment was different because there wasn't the same pressure on me. I just felt like it was time to make a change.
The pressure was internal.
The first one was like, I've got to make a change because I'm going to crack.
There was pressure, but it was internal, not external.
Yeah. And I think for anyone listening as well, it's like there will be these moments in your past, and it's like often they don't manifest as being these like life-changing moments at a time. It's only when you kind of like reflect back on them afterwards.
And I guess that speaks, Rob, to the fact that whatever you're going through, whatever, whether it's good or bad, my mum has a saying, good or bad, who can say? So something's going on, good or bad, who can say? And there is a story behind that about a Chinese farmer and whatever. I don't really want to go into it, but the reality is something happening is not the thing. How you respond to it is the thing. I think it was Seneca, the Greek philosopher or Roman philosopher or whatever. He said, it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond that matters. And Shakespeare said it as well. So nothing's either good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. And just with what you said there, Rob, that knowing that when you get to like Steve Jobs, so when you get to a certain place in your life, any place in your life, and look back, you will guarantee you will be able to see the thread that connects it all together. Hopefully, that should give people hope that wherever they are now, whatever situation they're in now, at a future time, when they look back, they will see how it connects to everything else that's happened and how it connects to what has gone on subsequently, where at the moment you can't see where it's going. So just relax.
I think the best thing that happened to me was becoming a dad, and because it exposed all of my recurring patterns of behavior that were in many respects sabotaging me. And this often manifests as like me isolating myself and trying to do everything by myself and being this like lone hero fighting all the monsters in the woods at the same time. And like I'm trying to consciously do things a little bit differently on the situation because it hasn't served me.
Yeah.
Having kids forced me to do that because it took away. I used to be able to work around it by just working really long hours, and I can't do that anymore. Which again, I guess adds pressure on you, but pressure in a good way that isn't going to break me, but pressure that just forces me to make different choices.
I hear you.
I also value the time that I get by myself, like infinitely more as well, because like I've already watched like Sleeping Beauty and Snow White this morning. Just while we're on the topic of like movies and things like that, like something you do find in movies is helper characters, so that when there is this point of pressure on the protagonist and the protagonist breaks or makes a zag, there will usually be like helper characters around that help them either pick up the pieces And that was the case in my story, and it sounds like it was the case in your story with your wife. It's like, how important is that for people to consider the support networks that they have?
Yeah, very much so. Funny enough, though, my concern for other people, as you said that, and I kind of sense where you were going with it, straight away I'm thinking about someone listening to this who thinks that they don't have anyone around to help them, because you're absolutely right. The reason that it's in films and stories that we see, played out in fiction, is because it's a reflection of what happens. Art reflects reality. Andrea, my wife, I would not be where I am and who I am now without Andrea. There's no. You ask any of my family, absolutely adore Andrea for her and for how she's helped me become a better person, really, at the end of the day. It's not all her. I take some credit. I've had to do the work. But yeah, and there have been others, too many to name. But yeah, you're right. And it's a good exercise. I think good reflection exercise to think back to who have been those helper characters. And the thing that's going through my head, and I know this isn't a coaching session, but I'll take what I can get. What I'm thinking to myself is, do all the people that, as I reflect on who have been my helpers over the last 55 years, do they know that? Do they know how important their involvement in my life has been? Some of them, yes. Some of them, no.
The guy in the lift was a helper character, That was someone that you had to go and have a conversation with.
Interesting.
You could debate whether it's debatable, isn't it? Whether the universe put that person in front of you because that was who you needed to meet, or whether it was just a chance random interaction.
But I think there's a lot to be. Where I was going with it was, I think there's a lot to be said for expressing gratitude. And this isn't a podcast about ADHD, but it's part of who I am. And lack of object and emotional permanence is a thing with ADHD. If it's out of sight, it's out of mind. That's why you go to someone's house who has ADHD and there is stuff out. Because if it's put away, then we forget about it and we don't know. And that's the same with relationships. It's like, okay, be vulnerable. It was my mum's birthday this week. I sent her a card only because Andrea bought one. And I forgot to, I didn't forget to phone or text my mum on her birthday. I remembered lots and lots of times. I just didn't act on it. So out of sight, out of mind. So what I'm thinking to myself is, as I create the space to think about these people that have been helper characters, is just to send them a message somehow, just to say thank you.
I think helper characters don't get enough gratitude, even in the world of literature.
They don't.
They're just a means for the protagonist to develop into more of a... So in literature, the helper characters usually possess knowledge or skills or traits that the hero needs in order to complete the character arc and have the happy ending and live happily ever after and go off as this whole human being. And that's still the case in our stories, and that our helper characters have skills and traits that we don't have or maybe need to learn, but we don't go off in this state of happily ever after. I feel like that's a failing of literature, actually.
So I'm going to do something about that.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about was risk. And what would you say your kind of policy is on risk? Because obviously this kind of runs on quite a wide scale, doesn't it? I basically think that I'm willing to take some risks, but I still think I'm on the conservative side of things. It's just that the general populace is so risk averse that I think it's drilled into us in school to be risk averse. And that's maybe a second question is like, well, what expectations have been drilled into us early on that maybe are damaging for taking sensible risks?
Yeah, I've got one word about school. Well, two words, but one of those words is school. Fuck school.
When I was doing A-levels, we used to, in general studies, we used to go off to the local snooker hall and fuck school and play snooker. And then one day the fire alarm went off and then I had a phone call off my mate saying, Deputy Head Askew wants to know where you are. It's like, oh, shit. So suddenly fuck school was like slightly less...
I see it in real time at the moment with our youngest son, Isaac. He's in the middle of his GCSEs. He's 16, so whatever country you're in when you're listening to this, just think about exams that 15, 16-year-olds take in your country. He's going through them. After every one, but before he goes out, he's how do you feel about it? So, well, whatever, don't care. English language, though, he's hugely creative and imaginative. He was looking forward to that. Because ultimately, Isaac is a musician. He's a performer. That's what he wants to do. It's part of his internal gyro compass. Gifted keyboard player, just a gifted musician. He does stuff with the guitar and tunes, because he's not a guitarist, to get the sound that he wants out of a guitar. He tunes it, he just instinctively tunes it completely differently to how you normally. And a friend of his at school, he goes to a specialist music secondary school. One of his good friends, who is a guitarist, says, what makes you a great musician, Isaac, is that you just make the instrument come to you. You know what you want to get out of it, and you make it come to you. That's all he wants to do. It's all he wants to be. He can't wait to get to the GCSEs, because when he goes back at year 12, lower sixth, I still think in old school currency, all he's going to be doing is music tech. So he's going to build on his music performance work that he's done over the last 2 years, and then add in audio engineering, Matt's world, and sound production, and all of the kind of technical aspects of music, so that when he goes out into the world as a performer and as a musician, he's much more of that complete package. But because of the specialist nature of the secondary school he goes to, he won't have to do any. I mean, he can if he wants to, but music tech will constitute his 3 A levels, equivalent of 3 A levels. So just going back to what you were saying, Rob, is that the school system kind of demands that children, I think it was Sir Ken Robinson said that, even just regarding the date stamp on a child in terms of the date of birth as being the thing which is most important about moving them through this education system just seems totally ludicrous. When Isaac started, he was born in early October, so he was like one of the oldest of his class. So he had kids in his class that were almost a year younger than him. And at that age, at 5, 6 years old, that's a fifth of your life. The difference between someone who's 54 and 55 is marginal. The difference between someone who's 5 and someone who's 6 is just huge. I don't really know where this is going, apart from the fact to say, fuck school, because people are individual. And I think the sooner you can go through the kind of system which has to be gone through and start your own journey of self-exploration, the better.
Perhaps we could rephrase fuck school by saying there are significant foundational issues with the education system that are at odds with truly understanding yourself and what you bring to the world and what you need to be doing.
Much better said.
I've been thinking about this a lot recently, because my kids are a bit younger. So my kids are 6 and 4. So my son is in the second year he's in year 1 in junior school, which is the second year, grade 2, I guess. And my daughter will be starting school this year. And I'm perfectly happy for the state to teach my kids to read, write, count, to go and meet friends at school and share germs and do all of these things. I'm reasonably happy with that. Once they get older, the local secondary school here has a really bad reputation. And there was actually a knife incident where the school got put into lockdown recently. So this has raised the spectre of what do we do when he gets to 11, look more seriously at homeschooling, or I'm starting to think about these things now, because there's also the suspicion that primary level education, say up until kids are about 10, I don't think is particularly harmful, but I think actually in that sort of teenage years, it's I just feel like there's a better way. I don't know what it is. I don't have the answers. I just feel like the path that we just default send people down isn't helping.
Absolutely. And it's not just a subject of a podcast episode. I mean, you could have a whole podcast series about education and child development, and I'm sure many exist. But I'm aware that that kind of tangent started with you asking about risk. And I think generally I'm the sort of person, well, not just I'm the sort of person, I have in my past got to the end of my tether with jobs that I've been in and just handed in my resignation with nothing.
And not a plan.
With no plan. Yeah. And
colleagues look at you like you're crazy as well, don't they? What are you doing? you got to be out on the streets eating out of dustbins and stuff. It's like, well, it's not really going to come to that, is it? Like,
No, it isn't. And again, bless Andrea's socks for sticking with me through it. I remember one job in particular, and she was just like, well, what the hell are we going to do? So yes, I'm far more tolerant of risk than your average bear, but it's who I am. I'm learning to take less risks financially, because with ADHD, the risk is both physical and it's financial, credit cards and all that, debt and whatever. But I'm doing better to manage that side of it. But risk is exciting. Dopamine comes with risk, and that's ultimately what we're looking for.
I think it's maybe like small risks for potentially big gains, and that's part of the entrepreneurial journey as well. And that we're hoping to make bigger gains than we would achieve by just doing a job for someone.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And also another aspect of the entrepreneurial journey, and very much tied to the not a straight line, is that when you start out in business, and I'm speaking from firsthand experience, because you're so good at what you do, and the value that you can provide to the people that you want to serve, the people that you want to help, and the problems and pains that you will be able to mitigate or eliminate for them, you think it will be a lot easier to get clients than it actually is.
And also we're not taught anywhere, like either formally or informally, like we're not taught how to be in business and how to bring on clients and how to build people and how to organize your affairs and all of that stuff. Like we just have to muddle through, and I muddle through, and I'm glad that I've done it all. Like I actually, because I was employed for quite a while, I actually did my own accounting for a few years, including my corporate returns. And I've recently just hired a bookkeeper again, because I was like, you know what, I need to like stop at being the accountant in my business.
But it speaks to the non-straight line thing, because again, just going back to 7-year-old Pete wanted to be an ice cream van man, I had an idea in my head. Although I never actually became an ice cream van man, so I wasn't able to kind of correlate the two, but I had an idea in my head. And people that are starting out in business and have been in business when you're starting out, you have an idea that it should be relatively easy to get clients, because when people find out about how I'm able to help them and to solve their problems, remove the pains out of their life, either personally or professionally, people will want to work with me. But the reality is that there is a lot of stuff competing, both for your potential client's attention and your potential client's money. So this comes back to what you were saying earlier about what your focus is on, is for anyone that is doing anything meaningful, there is probably going to be there's going to be a significant exchange of money. That if the problem on the client side is big enough to solve, then it needs some investment to solve it. And you would hope that once the problem or pain has been removed, the value has been provided, that is going to be worth that investment. But there's a correlation, because the more money that is required to solve a problem, the more trust is required before that financial transaction takes place. Does that make sense?
And that trust happens internally. That's a feeling in the body, not a thought in the head.
100%. 100%. And let's kind of be meta about this. That is one of the reasons that Not a Straight Line podcasts exists, because on the side of Not a Straight Line is a service called Activate Your Podcast. Now, what Activate Your Podcast does is it does pretty much what you have done with me, Rob. And you are part of Activate Your Podcast. So you will be sitting down and you will be having conversations with business owners to get out of their head the story of who they are, why they are, where they are, who they serve, why they serve that particular audience, what pains and problems do they mitigate or eliminate, and what are some kind of examples around that. And in marketing or in sales, one can think that it's difficult to talk about this because I'm talking about myself. For me to think that I could sit down in a sales environment with a marketing agency, say that is thinking about recommending Activate Your Podcast service to their clients, and me telling that marketing agency owner, all of the stuff that I've just shared about the conversation with Neil, where he said his wife died, and the conversation with the ladies on the beach and whatever. No, it's not going to happen. But they are part of who I am. And when you know that about me, then it engenders trust, because the more you know about someone, the more you feel able to trust them.
You're no longer just, I mean, there's plenty of solutions for starting a podcast. So if we just talked about podcasting, and it would just be the same as what everyone else talks about, surely.
Yeah, it would be. So the idea of Activate Your Podcast is that, there's a lot of reasons that business owners don't start podcasts. There's the fear of the tech, and there's a sense of, how am I going to keep it up once I get going, and what's the format of it? So we just say, look, forget about that. It's the activator in me. It's the producer in me. It's like, just get started. And how we can help you activate your podcast is just start with this first handful of episodes, which that might be all that your podcast is. It's never more than just those first 4 or 5 episodes. But those 4 or 5 episodes, from that, you will be able to repurpose it for LinkedIn posts, for Instagram reels, whatever social media and marketing stuff that you do. You will probably find sound bites which can be turned into paid ads on LinkedIn. Rob, I know that's a specialty of yours. Once your story is out of your head, it can be used to build trust with your ideal clients, reduce the time that it takes people to go from finding out about you to becoming a client, having that financial transaction, and be able to do that with more people. Because once your podcast is live, you can then have marketing activity which drives people to that. I know one of the instigators of the Activate Your Podcast service was getting into the orbit of Strategic Coach. It's a absolutely amazing entrepreneurial coaching company based in Canada. Dan Sullivan, the founder, has been coaching entrepreneurs for close on 4 decades. There's not much that if anything, that he doesn't know about entrepreneurship. And Dan Sullivan, on one of his podcasts, said that he knew it had started to work when people started signing up for Strategic Coach, and it's multiple tens of thousands of dollars to buy to get into Strategic Coach for a year, and they were signing up themselves with no interaction with salespeople because of what they've heard on the podcast. So the level of trust that had been established purely on an audio mechanism from people listening to Dan. And Dan's podcast, he always does them in partnership with other people. So they're just looking at different aspects of being a 10 times entrepreneur, whether it's marketing, or whether it be the tech that you employ, or whatever. Lots of different aspects of the entrepreneurial journey from the Strategic Coach's perspective. And with all of that, that's enough for people to have enough trust in Strategic Coach and Dan Sullivan to put their hand in their pocket for a lot of money. And that's what I want to get to with Activate Your Podcast, to create a space, going back to what you said earlier, Rob, to create a space where entrepreneurs can tell their story in an authentic way. I'm just having a conversation with a mate. It's like, it's really easy, this. And then Matt's able to do his magic into these handful of like pillar episodes, if you like, or foundational content to introduce people, to introduce potential clients to your business. If you're a business owner listening to this, and you struggle with long sales cycle, or not enough people, not enough of the right kind of people, so you might be a financial advisor, for example, and you currently work with people that have £1 million to invest, but actually your ideal client is somebody who's got £10 million to invest. Well, what if you had pillar episodes of a podcast where you spoke to that ideal client in particular? It's giving you, the business owner, an opportunity to help ideal clients get a feel for who you are, why you're doing what you're doing, and how you can help them solve their problems specifically in a way that scales you, that you could be doing that with someone without having any face-to-face interaction. You just think about Strategic Coach's example. And potentially allows you to step back from doing that one-to-one involvement of working in the business, that you might have salespeople or other people that are managing that process for you. But pillar episodes of your podcast allows you to weave that into your sales process. So before your salesperson sits down with a potential client for the first time, part of the process or the expectation is that a potential client has listened to the 20 or 25 minutes, if you like, of the 4 or 5 episodes of your podcast. So already they're primed. I mean, how would you describe that, Rob? How would you describe that aspect of of using a podcast in a business?
Well, the reason podcasting works is because people can listen to it on the go. They can listen to it in the car, listen in the gym. That's why we start with audio. What we're doing with the podcast is if you were playing golf, closing a high value sale based on trust without having the podcast or the assets or anything that people can go and consume, it's like trying to hit a hole in one. Or perhaps not quite a hole in one, but you're trying to get the ball in the hole from a long way out.
Yeah.
And you're going to need very skilled salespeople, very skilled golfers in order to do that. You're going to have to pay them a lot of money. Whereas actually what the podcast is doing is it's just nudging people further towards the hole. So hopefully by the time you get on a sales call with them, they're already on the green. You're just standing there by the hole with your putter, just like tapping them in the hole.
I love that analogy. I know, Matt, you're a big one for analogies and metaphors. Can you think of a metaphor, an analogy of why even bother having a podcast? I know that business owners and marketing agencies in particular that I talk to about Activate Your Podcast in terms of them recommending Activate Your Podcast service to their clients so that the marketing agency has got content and assets and stories that they can use in the marketing of the business. How would you describe and speak to this aspect of using a podcast in growing a business?
The thing that people underestimate about creating a podcast, which the two of you have done throughout this conversation, and it's not a criticism at all, but the phrase used in podcasting a lot is to whoever is listening, to all the listeners. People use those phrases a lot when they're talking to their audience through their podcast. What I think people should do, and there's a reason for this, they should say, and to you, or, the one person who you're currently reaching with this podcast in their ears, with whatever they're doing. You're a necessary part of their existence at the time in which they're choosing to listen to your program.
Because if you say to all the listeners, you break that hypnotic state, don't you?
Yeah,
that's it. They feel like they're part of a herd instead of they're being singled out, and that you are directly talking to them, because that's essentially what you're doing, and that's what gets them to the green and gets them closer to the hole.
And it also speaks to how and why it is so important to surround yourself with people that are so much better than you. Dan Sullivan has a concept called who, not how. He didn't invent it, but he built on it. And it's about, if you want to achieve something significant, who can you work with and collaborate with to make that happen? Not how can I make it happen? So I will take Matt's input there and say to you, the listener, if you're a business owner and you're frustrated with the amount of time that it takes to move people from finding out about you to actually becoming customers or becoming clients, then maybe you should think about activating your own podcast.
Thanks for listening to this bonus episode of Not a Straight Line with Peter Daly-Dickson. If you haven't listened to the first 5 pillar episodes yet, make sure you jump back in the feed and add them to your playlist. If you enjoyed this conversation, leave a review in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure you subscribed to Not a Straight Line to hear more stories in the coming weeks. If you'd like to find out more about the show, head to podcast.notastraightline.life. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, head to podcast.notastraightline.life/guest. These links will be in the show notes. And join Peter Daly-Dickson next week as he chats with a guest to explore their own fascinating and inspirational journey. Spoiler alert, it won't be a straight line.